ODSC, and Superset for coming. We are going to get started, but I just want to point out that the entire front row is open. If anybody wants to just come a little bit closer, I promise none of our speakers bite. If you need anything, come find me tonight. I'm easy to spot. Feel free to track me down. Search for me through the crowd, my orange hair. It's all good. And without further ado, Checksum McGovern, founder and CEO of ODSC AI. It's a lot of letters.
Jenny, thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm going to be the good guy here. You guys won't look way too comfortable. I'm not going to ask you to move. Look, the furniture here at Superset. You guys get any work done? So yeah, as mentioned, I'm Checksum McGovern. I'm the founder of the Open Data Science Conference, or ODSC. Also stands for Open Data Science Community, and now we just stuck AI in the end of it because Open AI was already taken. So yeah, I want to thank everyone for coming here, and great to see so many of you chatting and talking to each other, because that's the whole idea here. Get to know each other, kind of share what you're working on. Good turnout by Checksum here as well. Also, we're going to have some time for networking later, I believe. How long is this talk scheduled to last?
An hour.
About an hour? Yeah, it's perfect. And yeah, share what you're doing, tell people what you're working on. And I want to tell you a few quick things about ODSC. If you can go to the next slide.
Trying to do that.
Vivek? No worries. So yeah, so a couple of things about us. We just had a conference back in Boston, where I flew in from. It was April 30th. And good turnout there. I see a few faces who were actually at that event in Boston. And then if you go to the next slide, we have another event coming up called ODSC West. I know a few of you here. I recognize a few faces who were at it last year. So I'll be excited to welcome you guys back. That's at the end of October. And who knows, by the end of October, everything in AI will have changed, right? Claude Code will finally be not asking you for permission every 5 seconds. We actually do some real work for you. All right, and what's on the next slide? Yeah, the next slide is on to the main event. So first of all, I would like to thank our hosts, of course, Superset, all the folks here at Superset for hosting this meetup in their beautiful office building. Thank you very much. And especially for the good food. Usually we have cold pizza, so it's nice to have an event where it's catered. That makes a big plus. And our speakers today are Gal Perret, who is co-founder and CEO of Checksum. Gal, on my left there.
Yeah.
And for you, those who don't know, Vivek Vaidya, who is founding partner here at Superset. Gal and Vivek, the floor is yours.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, everybody can hear us in the back. So thank you to ODSC, thank you Seamus for partnering with us to host this event. Today we're going to talk about what it takes to build an AI native startup with Gal here. So first, just for those of you who probably don't know what Superset is, we are a startup studio. When we describe what we do to people, they say, oh, you're an accelerator, oh, you're an incubator, oh, you're a VC firm. We're kind of sort of all those three things. The most important thing to kind of take away from what we do is we are not just providers of capital. We actually are passionate company builders, so we work with our co-founders to co-create and build startups from scratch. So we get involved with our co-founders like Gal as early as possible in their journey, and Gal's going to talk to you more about his journey and where he started and how the process kind of unfolded. But so we're not your typical incubator. We are a startup studio. Our backgrounds are in B2B enterprise software. My co-founder Tom and I, and then our third partner Peter, we've all together built multiple companies amongst ourselves, and have had exits and so on and so forth. So we work with our co-founders to co-create and build companies. In addition to money, we are on our second seed fund, or between the three funds that we've raised, two of them seed funds and one an opportunity fund, we've raised about $200 million in capital. So this is a smattering of companies in our portfolio. As you can imagine, we don't have a lot of companies in our portfolio. It's because we work with our co-founders to build these companies. So unlike a YC or any other accelerator, we cannot afford, we don't have the bandwidth to have hundreds of companies. So we're very selective in who we work with, but the trade-off and the flip side of that is that we go deep with our companies or with our co-founders in building these companies. So we're going to talk today about Checksum. The companies that you're seeing over here are in various stages of their journey. Companies like Catch are Series B and beyond. Companies like Kana and Zig are just getting started. We've raised seed funding, and there are some companies that are not even present on the screen over here that we're still in the ideation / formation phase right now. So what distinguishes us from your typical incubator or accelerator? First, we actually, as I said before, we co-create with our co-founders. So we have a program called Signal, where we prefer co-founders come and work with us as early as possible in their journey. And Gal will talk to you more about his journey and where he started, but we prefer co-founders to start with us in the pre-ideation phase even, when they're not even sure what they want to work on. They just know that they want to build a company in some space that is A, B, or C. So to give you an analogy, they perhaps know the area code where they want to operate in, but they don't know the zip code of the exact neighborhood that they want to work in. That's our special sauce, and that's our value proposition. Is we have architected the Signal program to work with our co-founders and over a period of 3 to 5 months hone in on here's the exact problem we're solving, here's how the company is going to evolve, and here's who we're selling it to, and how the company build out is going to unfold. So that's the Signal program, the 3 to 5 month Signal program that we have, where co-founders come in and work with us. The second thing is we provide platforms, not playbooks. So we don't hand you a document that says, oh, here's how you go do X, and then it's on to the co-founder or the entrepreneur to go actually implement everything in the playbook. We actually give you platforms or tools that help you in your company building journey. So 2 of the tools that we have, one, everybody is building with AI right now, and with LLMs right now, but very few people actually have the infrastructure to really understand what's costing more versus less. If you're using Cloud Opus 4.7 for everything, is that the right thing to do? Or are there certain use cases in your application where Sonnet or Haiku might be a better choice? Is going to Anthropic or Claude always the right thing to do? Or should you sometimes just go to Gemini Flash 3.1 Pro? You need tooling to help you understand how your product is getting used, what are the different use cases for agentic AI or LLM calls in your application, and help you figure out, for this use case you should be using this model, and for this use case you should be using another model. Now that's good in theory. We actually have a platform and an entire toolkit that we've built called Majordomo that is available to use by every one of our portfolio companies and co-founders that are with us. The second tool is called Hauser, and it's a GTM tool. One of the hardest things about, or perhaps the hardest thing about company building, once you've decided what you're going to build, is how to find customers. And Hauser is meant to solve that problem. Customer discovery, ICP definition, how to do messaging, how to do outbound. Hauser is a collection of tools, or a platform really, for actioning your entire GTM workflow. So we provide these tools, these platforms to our portfolio companies out of the box. They don't have to spend time working on any of these things themselves. We provide them these tools, in addition to all of the hands-on, roll-up-your-sleeves work that we do, whether it's coding, whether it's go-to-market, whether it's selling, whether it's strategy, the entire set of functions that you go through as you're building a company. So today, we're going to talk about one of our companies, and we're going to go deep. We're going to go deep into what the company does, why was it started, what the journey's been like, Checksum, and the company's called Checksum. It's an end-to-end platform for AI code quality. Now, if you've taken BART here, or if you've kind of seen billboards on the 101, you'll see a lot of billboards talk about, well, AI slop and AI is writing code. Who's reviewing the code? There are a lot of AI code review tools that claim to solve your code AI slop problem. But code review is just one thing. How do you actually know the code works? How do you verify that the code actually works in your production environment? That's the problem that Checksum solves, end to end, right from your front end all the way back to your database layer and everything else in between. So we're going to talk more about what Checksum does, how it does it, what the challenges are, where AI fits in with Gal momentarily. Checksum has lots and lots of marquee customers of different shapes and sizes. We have small to medium-sized startups and all the way to large enterprises like Indeed and Atlassian also using Checksum for all of their testing needs. So with that, I am going to stop this presentation and now welcome Gal onto stage and ask him to just introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Gal. I'm a co-founder and CEO at Checksum, which we'll talk more about. Originally from Israel, moved to the US around 8 years ago now, led product at Google, CTO of a YCDX startup, and now co-founder Checksum with Tom, Vivek, and Peter.
Cool. So Gal, it's been a few years, right?
Yeah.
And tell us in your words. I kind of described my own version of what Checksum does, but you describe in your own words. What does Checksum do?
Yeah, the simplest version of it is we make sure your code works 100% of the time. And the reality is that with AI, companies can write code extremely fast, but knowing that the code works is still the bottleneck. So there are companies that just spend a lot of time reviewing the code, testing, making sure it works, but then they're not shipping as fast. And there are companies that ship very fast, but then they're just spending their time firefighting. Because when you ship fast, with AI especially, you're going to have a lot of bugs in production, and we see it across the board. And so Checksum is solving this problem by making sure you always have a very robust, comprehensive testing suite that automatically updates, always fresh, and you can run it at every point of your software development lifecycle. So you can ship your code fast, not just write it fast.
Yeah. Let's just take a quick poll. How many of you use Claude Code or Codex in your day-to-day work? A few hands, right? So, how many of you use code review tools like a CodeRabbit or something in addition to? So one, good. So not a lot. Somebody said, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, well, I use Claude to review my code.
Yeah, I do it too. Actually, I have Claude Code writing code. I have Codex reviewing Claude Code's code, and then I kind of go flip-flop between them. Right? The idea over there is simple. Coding agents produce a lot of code very, very quickly. Very quickly. It becomes a nightmare to review it. And even if you ask another coding agent to review that code, it never does a comprehensive job of reviewing it. So you end up with bugs, and sometimes really obvious bugs, sometimes really gnarly bugs. And that's what Checksum does.
Yeah, and I'm curious, since we're going to talk a bit about company building with AI, not just coding with AI. Does anyone have like a very creative usage of Claude Code or AI in general they want to share? I'll share mine. So, and maybe it will spark some ideas. My son is 2 years old. He loves taking the bus. That's his favorite thing. Like we go when we go to museums, but for him it's like the way they're taking the bus. The moment we get to the museum, it's like, when are we going back to the bus? So I asked ChatGPT to create a table with all of the buses in San Francisco and the nice attractions for each one of them. And every weekend we check 1 or 2 routes, and we also go to the attraction. So that's probably the best use of AI for me.
Yeah, I actually use AI to do a lot of writing these days, and for the longest time, I've been frustrated with how computer science and mathematics is taught. And I wanted to create this, I want to write a book before all this AI thing happened. I want to write a book where you teach computer science or mathematics through history and tell stories. The motivation for that was, I'm a big fan of Alan Turing and all of the work that he did at Bletchley Park. So I was always wondering, why wasn't I taught the Bayes theorem using all the techniques that Alan Turing and his group at Bletchley used to break Enigma, which led to the Allies' victory in the Second World War. And so I've used AI to actually help me research and then write these stories as well.
It makes sense. That's how I got into computer science, by the way. I read a book called Encryption Secrets.
Yeah.
It was only talking about encryption, but from there I got to RSA, and then learning how RSA works, then learning how the internet works, and then building web apps. But that's the first book I've read that has any connection to computer science.
So speaking of how you got into computer science, how you were at Google, right?
Yeah.
And then you joined a VC startup. You were the CTO of a VC startup called Seer,
Yeah.
right? This problem of QA, you spotted it early, right? At Seer.
Yeah, in both places, by the way. So at Google, you could ship very, very confidently. There were so many tests, rollouts, beta, alpha, dog fooding. It was very hard. You really need to be very creative to be able to ship a bug. Like, it was a hard problem to ship a bug. And the problem is that all of those things had massive, massive costs. QA teams, let's say like this, from the moment that a software engineer came to me and said, hey, feature is ready, till the moment he could have merged the PR, there would be 1 or 2 weeks of writing tests. How are we going to test it, etc., etc. And then you merge the PR, and there were 1 or 2 months of rollout. First, let's do alpha and measure the metrics, A/B testing, making sure the cache analytics look good, and slow rollout. And then when I went to Seer, there was the opposite problem. Like the main problem I was brought in to solve is we just have so many bugs and we can't just get out of it. And one of the things I did, okay, let's build a testing suite, let's slow down a bit, let's do more testing. And still, customers would always find ways to break our app. So the idea was, even unrelated to AI, can we just take what our users are doing and just do that before we ship in a very, very fast and concentrated way? And I worked on Google on a few transformer projects, or not a few, but basically what I did is I shipped consumer voice products through the Google Assistant that were AI based. It was all transformer based, but not large language model based. So with ChatGPT launched, with our understanding of what transformers could do, we launched Checksum. And I think the original idea at the beginning not to use LLMs, it's just look at how great transformers are. Let's just build models that can mimic user behavior. And as LLMs became really, really good, it's kind of the old solution that we started using that instead of trying to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, that's on the technology side. But then, as we were coming up with or formulating the initial idea, how did you validate that this was a real problem? How did you validate the idea? What did that process look like?
Yeah, so first of all, it was just a personal pain, right? I'm always the person who opens the bugs and gets frustrated with them, and why does nobody clicks on this button and make sure it works? So it was, throughout my career, I was always the person who records the bugs. It's frustrating. Why can't someone just click the damn button for me and just tell me if something doesn't work? And then the Hive is super useful, right? We have today, how many companies just in this office? 5, 6, 7 companies in this office. CTOs, VP R&D, junior engineers. If you want to have 20, 30 customer conversations out there in the wild, it's going to take you weeks. In the Hive, you can do all of them in one day, and you don't even need to schedule. You just grab someone, hey, do you have 15 minutes for coffee? And so I think we just started with talking to people in the Hive.
Yeah, when Gal says the Hive, that's that's the term we use to refer to our superset community over here. It consists of all the companies and of course everybody who works at those companies. So when Gal says he talked to people in the Hive, he's talking about people like Justin and Sam who are sitting in the back over there who are at Catch, and all of the other folks here as well. So, so you had these initial conversations with folks in the Hive. Is that when you knew it was real, or was there another phase after that as well.
I'm not sure it's true right now.
Yeah?
I feel like you always, the next jump is always, no, you know, it's a process, basically what I'm saying. Like at the beginning, well, people are interested, let's build an MVP. And then it's like, well, people are using the MVP, let's continue to iterate. And then you always need, the next stage of realness is always, right, startups need to go fast. So every stage is another level of real which we need to prove ourselves.
Yeah, and actually, so just building on that, in the last year, the amount of progress that Claude Code and Claude together have, Opus or Sonnet or whatever, have made is phenomenal. Right? The sophistication, what was never even conceivable 6 to 9 months ago, is now just. But of course, we're gonna do that. So that I'm sure has had an impact on Checksum's journey, to your point. But I want you to share. As you've kind of gone through that journey yourself and with your customers, and what is one insight about AI coding and validation and testing that most people miss?
I don't know if more, I think the conversation misses it, and maybe a lot of people know it, but I'd love to get your take on it. It's very easy to build an MVP. All of the hype on Twitter of, look, I've built an Airbnb clone in 1 weekend. Great, go ship it to 100 million customers and save actual properties and collect actual money at a record speed with like 0 errors because you lose trust, and then tell me that you built it in a weekend. And I think as you're building internal tools and then you're launching them externally, I'm sure you can see the difference.
100%. Every time I come across a LinkedIn post that says, I built this over the weekend, I want those people to say, I shipped this over the weekend. Like that's the mindset shift that people need to make. Because building, to your point, especially building MVPs is easy. Shipping something, even if it is small, is hard.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And that's not part of the conversation. I agree. So just kind of pulling on that thread a little bit more. What do you know now about this whole process? How things unfolded and all of that. What do you know now that you wish you knew at the start?
Probably that the shortest way of doing something is just doing it, and the shortest way of shipping good software, especially in the early days, is just shipping it. So I do appreciate, like, hey, I built it over the weekend. Great, ship it, share a link. It's going to be broken. People are going to play. I have no issue with like you saying you built it over the weekend, and actually, if you want to make a real business out of it or making it really in any other way, it doesn't have to be attached to money. I do think the best way is to just build it over the weekend, share a link over LinkedIn. So I actually think it's a very smart thing to do. So yeah, the best way is just find a way to do the thing you want to do in 24 hours, even if it's not going to work, then find a way to improve it the next day, and the next day. Within 1 or 2 weeks, it's like going to the gym, right? You go and you go and you go, and like 6 months afterwards, like, hey, I really look different.
Yeah.
So just, get those iterations.
I think but what you just said also reminds me about company building and startups in general, right? You have to embrace failure. You have to be comfortable with things not working. But the most important thing is to ship and iterate, and that part really hasn't changed.
Yeah, and you and I had a conversation unrelated to this talk just before it, where we both have a mutual connection that works at a very large and hot startup. I won't mention the name but I'm sure you'll agree and be happy to share. And it's a very successful startup, right? One of those startups you read on Twitter. It's a shit show here at Checksum, it's a shit show at Superset, and it's a shit show at the most successful learner startup out there. Like, it's always a shit show. It's just a shit show on the way up or a shit show on the way down. That's the two options. You cannot have just a good, sane startup.
It's like you're a duck in water, right? Above the surface, everything is calm, but underneath, you're just flapping, right? It doesn't matter what stage you're at in your startup journey, whether you're just getting started or like catch your Series B and beyond. It's always like that. Cool. So I want to shift gears a little bit, and now you want to say one more thing?
Yeah. Rio, first question. Ship it early and start working on go-to-market in day one. I think a lot of the times the product, like go-to-market is like a bucket. You put water in and then some of it leak, right? And at the beginning, you know that there's a lot of leakage because the product is barely working and you don't know how to sell it. And you feel like it's a waste to go and talk to people where you know the feedback you're going to get is that's not good enough. But it's also a muscle. So I think even if you know you're not going to be able to sell your product and you're going to get a bunch of no's, you have to get those meetings. Or whatever your go-to-market strategy is eventually, you have to start early, post on social media before your product, even before your product is ready, post on social media on your problem. Once you have a product, post it on your product, etc., etc. Or again, whatever, if your go-to-market is more sales, get those meetings early, even if you don't have anything to sell. Just talk to them about the problem, show them a few slides, ask them if they might be interested in something like this in the future.
Here. So now let's get into the guts of the product and challenges over there, right? So Checksum has 3, maybe 4 different types of agents that run to solve the end-to-end testing problem at different stages of the software lifecycle. Making these agents work reliably at scale is hard, right?
Yeah, it's tough.
So what do you think is the core technical challenge or the top 3 core technical challenges that people just underestimate?
I think getting an agent to work on your local machine is the same thing. It's easy because you're a person and you trust it and you know exactly what you are going to do. The moment you put your agent in front of a customer, there's a question of, okay, how do I get the agent to converse with OpenAI without exposing my API key to the customer? How do I run it on a sandbox? How do I make it reliable? How do I communicate between my server to a sandbox? So there's just a few examples where if you run an agent to a third party where you might or might not be able to trust, and you want the agent to be fully autonomous, so you also can't put any guardrails around the agent, it becomes an extremely complicated problem. The whole sandboxing problem.
Yeah, I think so. It's 2 interesting issues that Gal's talking about, right? One is just how do you make LLMs reliable? How many of you have experienced Claude Code being down or Claude being down when you try to use Claude Code? Quite a few, right? So now, when you're using Claude Code and you say, okay, write me this code or whatever, and Claude's down, the Claude Code says API error, timeout, blah, blah, blah. And like, shit, it gave me a timeout. Let me go have a cup of coffee. And maybe status.anthropic.com will say Claude's green now, right? But if your customer is using your product, which uses Claude underneath, and now Claude's down, the customer doesn't care that Claude's down. They want you to generate the content or run your test or do whatever it is that your agent does for them. So you have to make your agent reliable. You have to have what I call cascades that say, okay, if Claude's down, try OpenAI. OpenAI is down, try Gemini. Now, the interesting thing over there is how do you ensure the same quality of response across these 3 providers, because the models are different. Some are good at X and some are good at Y. So that in and of itself becomes an engineering exercise that you have to conduct before, or not just before, but continuously as you are building and customers are using your product. The second thing is, as Gal mentioned, is guardrails. Agents will misbehave. You ask them to add 2 + 2, they sometimes might give you 5, and that's not okay. So you have to have guardrails built around your agents to make sure that the output they're generating is what you expect them to generate. Depending on what type of agent you have and what type of use case you're supporting, the guardrails could be myriad, right? You could have a guardrail for not leaking PII to OpenAI or Anthropic. So all of these things, as Gal was saying, when you write the agent on your machine, it works. And like, great, I called the API and I did a thing. But in reality, it's when the rubber meets the road and your agent comes into contact with real customer data, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
So let's just keep pulling on that thread a little bit. You've talked about Checksum being an AI native company, right? And the title of the talk also was, what does it take to build an AI native company? What does that mean? What does being AI native mean, Gal?
So there's an AI native product. I think AI native product is a product that essentially is built with AI, and AI is the product, and it's just being, how do you make it accessible to customers? So Checksum is, at the end of the day, it's AI agents that help you verify your code. If you take AI out of our product, it doesn't work, right? Maybe differently to HubSpot, I don't know, CRM, right? It works with AI, without AI, I can make it better. The second part of AI native product, and I'll talk about the company, is that you build for AI as users and not just users. So a big part of people out there, including myself, you don't want to use the tool. You want to connect the tool to Cloud Code or whatever, and then have prompt Cloud Code to it. So I think thinking about how do you allow your system to integrate with all of those different workflows, not just with Cloud Code, but all of those different workflows that require AI.
I think that's a very interesting point, which is, so I just want to emphasize it. What Gal's saying is that, and it took me a while to kind of wrap my head around it too, is your product is designed to be used by agents. That changes the whole trajectory of how you build your product. Because if it is being used by humans, there are UI, UX you can design with the assumption that, oh, a human being is going to trigger it, a human being is going to do X, and this kind of output is going to be okay for a human to consume. But if your user is an agent, then you have to just think about the surface area or the periphery of your product, the touch points and the hooks you want to build into it very differently than if you were just doing it for humans. That's a big challenge actually, right?
Yeah, it's a big challenge, especially that it's changing. So you could build it to be used by agents, and then after 6 months, everything you've built is basically unnecessary because the agents are much better. You've built your own scaffolding, and now to get to the next level, you need to, tear it down.
What's an example of that you personally experienced at Checksum?
Let's do the simplest. So we've been building Checksum for a while with GPT-4, like with GPT-4. It didn't have native tool calling, right? So we've built like tool calls before tool calling existed. We basically prompted the agent to generate JSONs. We validated those JSONs, have all of those correction prompts, and then called the tools ourselves. Today, all of those APIs have tool calls embedded in them. You don't need to do all of those things. You can just write Pydantic or TypeScript types, and then just have the query. So this is something we spend most of our time on early on, is the corrections and the validations, which basically completely nullified once, I think around Claude Sonnet 3.5 is the first agent where when you ask it to produce a JSON, you would get the JSON in exactly the format you asked them, and that's it. And then frameworks that do this light validation came out, basically deleting what we worked on for a year, just to move it and switch.
So then, AI native company, does that just mean everybody's using Cloud Code?
No, first of all, I think it's a mindset thing. I think it means when you go to do something, you start with AI and let AI accelerate you. And I think it's across the functions. Everyone uses AI, but also you enable AI usage within the company. So we need, and I'll ask Joe to share in a second how he uses AI, but we've spent engineering time allowing our salespeople to use AI in their sales process. We spend engineering time to make our database accessible to Cloud Code, so our salespeople can ask questions and understand whose customer is best for renewal. Connecting the Google Ads account into our marketing Cloud Code took time. We needed to create a Google Ads. There's some complications, not as easy as just clicking a button. I won't take you through this. But we spend significant engineering time to allow all of the company to access the data they need. And I think there's a lot of other things we need to do. Now I'm thinking about how do we create shared skills and common playbooks across all of the AIs, because right now each person has their own way of working with AI and building their skills, but I'm sure that we can transfer this knowledge. Joe, do you want to share a bit about how you use AI? Joe is our account executive.
Joe, take a mic here. You might want to turn it on.
Hi, can you hear me? Is this working?
You might have to turn it.
Hello,
Yeah,
test,
there you
test.
go.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, yeah, like Mel said, I'm an account executive at Checksum, and I've started implementing AI into a bunch of different parts of the sales process, from the very top of the funnel, which is trying to find customers, trying to qualify customers, and trying to understand like where I should be focusing my time. This is influenced by everything downstream. So everything that I do is kind of fed through a cloud. I call it kind of like a brain, if you will. So it creates learnings as I go through the process. So as I go through, let's say, a demo, and we lose that customer, I try and understand why that happened. And if that is useful information, I can influence everything subsequently. So anytime I talk to a new customer, is that same problem that I ran into going to run into, like, am I going to run into it again? You know, let's say I win a deal. Why did I win that deal? I can go back through and kind of analyze certain things, like what specifically did this customer like? Why did they potentially purchase? And if I do that with every deal that I win, now I start to create this thread, like, and when I'm looking for new customers, if I can find somebody who has that same kind of DNA in their company, I can reasonably say this is going to be a good customer. And you know, now I can focus my time, which is very precious. You know, like an AI native company, we're spending so much time and so much effort trying to win new customers and trying to expand our footprint in the world. I want to make sure that every hour of every day is giving high impact. And with AI, I'm able to do all this. The more I use it, the more sophisticated it gets, the better it learns, the more effective it becomes, and kind of like that's, you know, almost like a daily thing for us. So
I think that's one of the things that we try to encourage everybody in our hive to do as well is AI native becomes part of the culture. And it's not just about engineers using Claude Code to write code, but it's a full company thing. And what a lot of people don't realize, and this is the point that Gal was making, is that oftentimes you have to spend engineering effort to build the infrastructure needed for your company to become AI native.
And I think there's two levels to it. One level where Checksum plays is build the infrastructure and hire people that are super AI forward and AI enthusiasts, so they will figure it out on their own. So I didn't tell Joe how to use AI, or I don't tell any one of our employees. I just give them the access, and then they just go and they figure out how to make it most useful for them. I imagine that in larger companies, you do need to have more training and push towards here's the things you can do that are useful. And let me give you an example. We do transfer knowledge, but it's more knowledge sharing less than a mandate or how we work. Because again, we have the benefits to hire a bit more carefully and get the people who are very startup mindset. I imagine as larger companies, they need to figure out how do you evangelize the new way of working until it becomes a difference.
So this is going to be an interesting question. Checksum is an AI agent, a product, right? Multiple AI agents in one. So as you think about the organization of the company, what's the hardest role or thing to hire for when your product itself is an AI agent?
Probably, I would say something around account executives, customer success, because you need people who are very good at selling and explaining, as well as people who are extremely tech forward that can talk to an engineer on the same level about AI. And I think that's probably every AI native developer facing company kind of looking at a unicorn. Because before AI, there are people who learn enough technical jobs to do this thing. But because AI moves so fast, if you're not on the frontier, which usually you need to use AI every day in your job to be on the frontier, you're falling behind. And so developers, most of them are on the frontier, or the ones who use AI and come to Checksum. But for account executives, customer success, even maybe marketing, it's harder to be on the frontier because they're not using Cloud Code to write code. So how can they? So one of the things we did like a series of 5 sessions where all of our account executives, or all of the sales and go-to-market team, vibe coded apps with Cloud Code, deployed them. We actually deployed them using Firebase. It was relatively simple apps, but actually deployed them online, and then wrote tests for them using Checksum, and then made changes in those apps and validate those changes using the Checksum test. So we wanted them to go the full cycle so they can actually kind of understand how it looks like.
Dog fooding, drinking your own champagne.
Exactly, and then the developer-facing company is a bit harder to dog food than.
No, but I think you're right. Like I'm guessing one of the biggest challenges for folks like Joe out in the field is when developers ask them, well, why can't I do this using Cloud Code, right? And so you have to be very comfortable and confident answering those questions. Yes, you can provide them all the enablement material you need, but your competition in some way, shape, or form is Cloud Code, right? So
and sometimes our answer is like, if you can do it with Cloud Code and you haven't tried, go do it with Cloud Code. And if you succeeded, then it's great outcome because you would have not been a good customer.
yeah,
Because you can do it in other ways. And if you didn't succeed, come back to us. So sometimes I do think one of the application questions is, have you tried doing it with Cloud Code or Codex? And if they didn't try, it's either says the problem is not urgent enough, so they didn't even bother.
yeah, it's a good signal.
Yeah, or something there is not like serious enough. The good customers already tried and failed.
Yeah. So let's shift gears now and talk about the implications of all this, right? So Checksum has 40 customers, 40, 50 customers, small, large, and we're generating tests, running tests, AI usage across the board. Customers have different use cases, different products, different workflows, et cetera, all of this results in an enormous amount of LLM usage, right? For Checksum, right? So how important is it for a business now like Checksum operating at your scale to have visibility into all of that? Do you know, for example, which customers are driving most of your LLM costs? Which agents are costing more versus less? Do you have visibility into all of that?
We're now starting to get it thanks to Majordomo, which was recently launched. Before that, no, I think it's a very good problem to have, to need this visibility, because when we have 1 or 2 or 3 customers, you can just look at the usage. I think now we're hitting the scale, or maybe 3 to 6 months ago, we had the scale where we need to see which customers are using the most tokens, making sure our margins are very healthy, because Checksum is not the kind of company that's just burning tokens and selling it on cents on the dollar. So we need to make sure our margins are healthy. And we also need to monitor our agents' performance and make sure every new model change, typically a new model is better, but a lot of the times it degrades certain parts of your app, so we need to do all of this monitoring.
So as you think about like one of the things that I've learned as I'm building Majordomo and I'm using it in other places is people talk about, oh yeah, you can just use Model A versus Model B. God talked about quality already. There is it's a 3-pronged kind of challenge. Cost is definitely one of them. You want to make sure you're using the cheapest model possible. But the definition of cheap is not just one that costs the least. You have to take into account things like quality also. So and then latency also. So for a particular use case, and this is the interesting thing that Checksum is able to do now with a tool like Majordomo, is for a particular use case, we're able to pick the model that has the lowest cost given the right amount of quality and the right amount of latency. Because a really, really fast answer, which is not the right quality, is useless from the end customer's perspective. So you have to think about along those three dimensions.
Yeah, and let me give a concrete example. I think it's a very nuanced but interesting problem. Anthropic models, one of the things that you need to do with LLMs is change content of files, right? So you need to provide an LLM tool that is able to edit files. Anthropic trains their model on find and replace. So basically the way you want Anthropic to do it is like, here's the old string, here's the new string. OpenAI trains their models on a Git apply patch. So it's a format to express changes in files that Git uses. And try to provide OpenAI models that find on the place, and the performance will degrade significantly. Figuring out those things is very, very hard. And I think one of the things we do all the time is reverse engineering Cloud Code and Codex to see what they do. And so that's one thing we picked up for a very long time. We only used Anthropic because OpenAI didn't work as well. And that was one of the things we discovered that really allowed us to use both of them.
So now you have access to a tool like Majordomo, right? You didn't when you started, right?
Yeah.
What would you have done anything differently if you had access to Majordomo earlier?
Good question. I think we got access just at the right time, to be honest. Earlier we had small enough customers that we could just review it one by one, and kind of be hands-on. I wouldn't try to also hyper-measure it when I have one customer. Like when you have one customer, you should look at the loads, you should kind of go deeper, you should use the tool yourself. And as you go bigger, you want to figure those things out. So I think it's just about time. I think pretty much your optimization that yourself could be important.
Cool. And so one thing that Gal didn't mention and we didn't cover is Gal was, we talked about Signal, which is the superset program for co-founding, co-creation, etc. Gal was the original. He was the OG. He was the first person to go through the Signal programs. He was so early that we didn't even call it Signal back then. And as you might imagine, given that he was the first, we were just starting out, there were a lot of things that we had to figure out in true startup fashion. Superset also is a startup. In true startup fashion, we were figuring out as we went along. And a lot of learnings from that process. But Gal, I want to ask you, what's the one thing that you wish Signal, or whatever it was called back then, had given you that you had to build yourself?
I think the main thing is around go-to-market. So go-to-market, it takes time to build. And I think when you go into a program that generally targets the same companies, and you can get assets from the program either in terms of platforms, so Hauser and platforms that allow you to just get the ground running from day one, and assets like a list of people or a brand behind you and following, like a LinkedIn account, super LinkedIn account has already following, so they can introduce Checksum, so you get some visibility. And especially in the early days, you just need like 5-10 customers, right? You're not talking about big numbers, so any kind of like something that gives you a start is extremely helpful. I think that at the time, Superset was building the motion together with Checksum. I think today, if you're like a very early company and you come to an event like this and you get to present in front of 50, 60 people, out of those you could have like your first 5 conversations even, which is valuable, right?
Yeah. No, I think what we've also learned a ton about how to not just organize these events, but what kind of systems we need. Everything that Gal's talking about, we had to do manually. There were no systems, there were no platforms, there were no tools that existed back then. Back then, I'm talking this was like 10 years ago. It was only a few years ago. But through that process, the realization and the learning for us is we can pay off the promise of co-creation and co-foundership and give our companies an unfair advantage by building these tools ourselves and making them available to our companies. So that's what we spend a lot of our time here at Superset doing now to support the future Gals of the world. Gal, I want to thank you. This has been a good conversation. I want to open it up to questions now, if people have any questions for Gal or me, anybody.
That's no great talk. Eric, 2 questions. One's a fun question. We'll get to the fun one at the end. But my first question is, since you guys do this for many companies, you're definitely gathering a lot of intelligence on how to work with one LLM, one type of code. Are you seeing intelligence that you're building where you have a customer come in a particular segment and you're like, oh, I already know what are some of the things that are critical test for you? So that's the serious question. But the fun question is, who's checking Checksum's code?
Checksum. So I'll let you take the first question. Yes, definitely so, and it's part of, today we do it a bit, so we have a lot of healthcare companies, insurance companies, we already know they think they care about making sure the quotes and the regulations, but in our vision, when you come in with an e-commerce company, we already know exactly how to test everything, because every e-commerce site is 95% the same. So we're doing that a bit, and we're expanding, and I think we're building it piece by piece, but that's definitely where the vision is essentially being able to test your software from day one, even if you have no users, being able to test your software from day one, because we just know how software is supposed to behave. Yeah, I already forgot to find out, but we test Checksum. Yeah, we use Checksum to test Checksum. I think it's a great experience, but also at the end of the day, we surface the information to humans and agents. That's where agents important. So the fact that AI agent writes the code helps us a lot, because then the entity that knows what it's supposed to do is also available 24/7. So if you just send the information to the entity, they can make a decision of, yes, that's what I meant, or I didn't mean it. In the past, it would have been called with people false positives, like, why are you sending me so much bullshit? I only care if I have real bugs, but today we can have more leeway because it's an AI agent on the other side that can make this decision. Not Checksum agent, but AI agent that wrote the code, that has all of the context and what it kind of becomes a philosophical intro, but there are knowledge and it becomes like the person who's responsible for this stuff.
Cloud code never complains.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. True.
Yeah, you can pass the mic on.
Any other questions?
There's one right in the back.
I'll run.
Hey, thank you very much for the wonderful session. Checksum as a product. I understand you have a very good understanding, definitely is your product. Just to simplify properly, before reading the code, providing the test cases for various things, be it user testing, script testing, integration testing, performance testing, and then running that to check whether the code is perfectly fine or not on a specific server, or maybe Azure or AWS, wherever it is, right? So my question is, these test cases, there are two questions associated. One, test cases, first of all, how good is that? Because getting 100% of the test cases and making sure the code to be correct, it's probably, there should be one or two bugs always remain there. So are you saying that Checksum makes sure that the code is 100% bug-free? That's first.
I mean, we're saying it. Is it true? Who knows? No, okay. So that's why we approach testing, but that's a wonderful question. And you touched about a topic we didn't introduce today, but our vision is to build what we call a code world model. So it's a model that understands how code is supposed to be run and operate versus how to write code. And when we think about the code world model and we think about tests, we think about what do your user, we think about the outputs, the expected outcome. So we don't try to read the code and say, oh, this code does ABC, let's try a test that makes sure it does ABC. Because then all of the tests will run 100% fast, and there's some value to it for regression and if you break in the future, but it doesn't really provide the 100% bug-free. And so we try to approach it from a user perspective. We try to learn how your software is used in the wild and how it's being run in the wild, because sometimes you can have bugs that only reproduce in production or staging, and then write tests that actually verify that part, because you're right. And yes, and we can't say 100% bug-free, because obviously there are some bugs. But in the age of AI, it's not just about what code review tools, they help you find bugs. What Checksum does, it helps you know that there aren't any bugs. Because if I found bugs, that's great, you eliminate a few bugs, but I still can't ship it until I manually test it and review the code, right? Because, okay, you find 1 or 2 bugs, maybe there are 8 more. And if I tell you there are no bugs, then you can just click the merge button and deploy, right? So at the age of AI, it's an order of magnitude different value you provide if you find me bugs or you tell me there are no bugs. And we're trying to play in the second camp because we think in our vision we want to allow an autonomous AI engineering system We want enterprise companies to deploy to production autonomously. It starts with the simpler tasks, and the tasks grow in complexity as AI become better. And in order to allow enterprise companies to deploy with AI to production autonomously, we think it's not just about finding bugs, it's also about guaranteeing that if we say there are no bugs, then you can trust it and ship it autonomously. So there's some confidence level there where you have bugs, you don't have bugs, you can ship it, or a human needs to review. And if we do our job correctly, we can allow enterprise companies to ship 50, 70, 80% of their PRs as AI become better autonomously to production without even a human needs to be involved in. Humans, I think, will always need to define what to do, but the initial prompt, but then take it all the way to production.
Sure, thank you. Second question, in market right now, if you see testing products, Union and others, various good products are available for enterprise solutions. Even if you see the DevOps cycle, Sonaki, Protify, Black Duck, whatnot, I mean, there are ample amount of testing tools which are there. So, what's your vision going forward? Are you going to take that to the whole DevOps cycle or pipeline? How do you place Checksum there in the market right now?
Yeah, so there's a few nuances we can talk about, but in like one sentence, our vision is to allow companies to ship to production autonomously. So we see everything around it. We think today testing is the biggest bottleneck, and if you have a very robust testing suite, you're almost able to ship to production autonomously. And as we fully solve this problem, we're going to move to more similar level problems. So tracking your user complaints, understand that there's a bug, roll back your version, right? A lot of the time, I don't mind rolling it to production, but I'm going to sleep, and if there's a bug, who's going to roll it back? I'm going to be waking up. So having AI that always monitors your production, can roll new versions, roll back new versions, can do A/B testing between different user groups to make sure the cache analytics are fine. All of the things that at Google we build a lot of business logic to make sure everything is working. Because you could automate it with business logic, but then you need to build it very specifically to the case. Doing all of those things with AI. We're very focused on testing, but in this vision scope, anything that allows you to ship to production autonomously, after you write the code, we don't want to play in the writing the code part. We think Majordomo is doing a great job there. I'll talk with AI. After you write the code, everything you need in order to put the code in the hands of your user is to meet it.
Thank you.
There's over here.
Actually, I have a quick question. Thanks for a great talk, Gavin. You got very, very insightful. The comment you made around guardrails is kind of interesting, because guardrails have been around a while. I used to think it's the holy grail of AI, getting your large language models to behave. But from your work, either of you working with AI agents, what do you think guardrails for LLMs have been around for a while? So where guardrails for agents, as you talk about AI agents, where are they the same in terms of similar guardrails for LLMs, and where do they differ?
I can take that, and God, you can jump in as well. So the first thing is, if you think about guardrails for LLMs, from the end application's perspective, not like as you're building and training the LLMs. That's a different problem altogether. But if I'm writing an application, I make a call to an LLM, the user did something, or my application needs something, I call the LLM gives back an output. That's a first order guardrail problem. I can have a post output validator that ensures that the output produced by the LLM conforms to certain guidelines and whatnot. If it doesn't, I can ask the LLM to try again. That's one way to implement a guardrail. Another way to implement a guardrail is to have that those constraints or those rules in the prompt itself. The LLM may respect them, may not, so you may always need the post validator, who knows, right? That's at the LLM level. It's just request response. And you can have a guardrail at every one of those interactions. At the agent level, now you're having a conversation. So there's a series of interactions, and not only do you need to implement guardrails at each turn, as they call it in the agent land, but you also have to look at the entire flow. The agent was supposed to deliver a particular outcome or perform a particular task. Did that task complete in a way that was expected by the user. So where this becomes interesting is, how do you define those rules? And how do you define those rules in a way that can be adaptive and dynamic as your application and the use of your agents evolve as well, right? So that's where I think a lot of work still needs to be done, both at the application layer and at the infrastructure layer, and also at the agent layer itself. People are talking about harnesses right now. Guardrails have become part of the harness framework that you end up using. How that evolves, I don't know the answer yet, but we're working on it in our own way across multiple companies over here.
Sounds like a good startup problem.
It is a good startup problem, absolutely.
Thank you. I was just curious on double clicking a bit on something you were talking about before. So you mentioned about the distinction between testing kind of after the code is written. And I'm sort of wondering if the feedback cycles of testing are kind of getting shorter. So in my model, in my head, you would have a sort of QI workflow where you've like done development of a feature, and then it sort of goes into a staging environment, and you do some sort of QA before it goes into production. However, particularly with coding agents and trying to move to more of a, say, software factory pattern, one of the key things is providing tools to the coding agent to be able to verify its own work. So for instance, like we publish open source code where we like provide conformance tests. So you can run the conformance tests when you're sort of implementing a protocol. And I guess with your type of product, like are you seeing a sort of smaller feedback loop where, like, if there's been a bunch of work to be able to actually codify how the software should behave, is that not like valuable to the coding agent in the coding process? So you want to sort of provide it in that iterative loop when you're actually making the software, rather than sort of separating the two.
100%, and that's a great point. All of the tests we provide as code directly into the repository using open source frameworks that are out there, that are already in the model training data. So when we provide, for example, end-to-end tests, we use Playwright with some Checksum flavor to make it more robust, etc., but essentially the API is Playwright. So when a coding agent works on a new change, it can run the Playwright test, it can change the Playwright tests, and you don't need to say anything because again, it's in the training set. We're using open source. But yeah, that's probably the biggest value proposition, that we make coding agents better. We'd be curious to hear when you say we provide the tests. Give us a bit context about what the context of that.
For like our stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're electric. We provide like data infrastructure, and so like for example, we have a protocol called durable streams, which is like a sort of binary streaming log, which is a data primitive for agents. And then so rather than releasing that as like a particular implementation, we wrote like an open protocol and conformance tests so that anyone can vibe code either a client or a server of the same protocol. So in a way, sort of open source software, now that software is so easy to replicate, it's not so much about providing necessarily an implementation. It was like what we did to sort of release the project was like release the conformance tests so that you could know when your implementation was correct. It's a bit like, so Martin Kleppman, like the data intensive systems book guy, like he wrote a kind of piece recently about like the increasing importance of formal verification for AI systems. Where like formal verification has always been a bit of a sort of maybe a complex academic area you might use for complicated systems. But like now you have agents that need to actually be able to verify correctness. You sort of need to bring this sort of like kind of correctness testing so that the agents have access to it. I guess maybe a follow-up question I have is like...
Actually, before you ask your follow-up question, can I just make a comment on that, the point you made? I think the key word, or the key phrase you used, formal verification of AI systems, and how do you define the system? That's where things get interesting, right? And the challenge for Checksum is that the system comprises of human beings as well, because they're the ones who are going to use the product. And that's what makes the testing part difficult, because you don't know how human beings are going to use your product, right? And that's where I think the interesting thing here is, because the tests are shipped as code, which can be made available to agents, and the tests actually exercise end-to-end functionality, not just how this service works or whatever. It adds both level of complexity and some higher guardrails, if you will, that are available now to the developer as they're building code, where if you're using Claude Code, there's checksum agents that are now being available to Claude Code, and they can run these testing cells. So it's a second order problem, if you will.
But, which is kind of what my follow-up question was going to be on. It was I was wondering if you have do you have sort of particular kind of know-how or sort of tips and techniques to be able to effectively codify softer requirements, kind of requirements from your customers, being able to express how they want their software to work that isn't necessarily sort of simply expressible in traditional tests? So you obviously have unit tests with sort of easy to automate functionality, and then you have functional tests, end-to-end tests, where you can get them also end-to-end workflow. But how do you actually extract out the requirements for the software and the people you work with?
When I code, it's something I do, and I do think a lot about how does checksum connects to this specific method. Because you're right, when I said writing the code and then shipping it, it's a very clear cut to make it simple to explain what we do and we don't do, but the reality is that checksum is used in the writing code in order for the iterative process. But when I work with Claude Code and I write a new feature, I actually align on a verification method as well, as part of planning. So we're going to do this feature, so we're going to do it, Now here's how we're going to verify it. I want you, this thing, open up a browser. For this thing, I want an integration test. This thing, I want you to make an API request. I want you to mock Stripe API here. Here, I want to use Stripe and a sandbox account to make sure it works. So I actually focus more on how are you going to verify that everything is working, and what is the output that I want to see to know that it's working. So sometimes I say, hey, record a video, or I want you to show me the request and response exactly that you've made. So maybe because I'm very focused on verification, that's my way of knowing. And often when we use checksum, I want you to run X, Y, Z tests, A, B, C, end-to-end tests in order to make sure it works. So I think that's my way. I don't know if it's the best way because we're on the go, but I think it helped me a lot to stop wasting my time and have Claude Code just get something that's actually working.
Any other hands?
Thank you so much for the wonderful insight on AI native companies. And my question to Gal is specific to that. So when different employees or people on the team are using their own suite of agents on Claude or maybe ChatGPT or things like that, what systems or tools do you have in place to sort of make sure that every iteration is not too distant from your brief? So for example, if there's a project that comes up and people are using their own agents, sometimes their interpretation and their previous history might influence the output in certain ways. So do you have something like that?
Yeah, I don't think we have a good solution right now. We're just letting people run with it. I don't see it a lot with checksum, but there is always the fear of over tinkering. So if someone spends 3 weeks, I have friends that did it 3 weeks to set up an open code that saves you 5% or 5 minutes a day. Great. In 3 years, you'll return the 3 weeks you spent. So you do want to, basically, I think as you run a startup, you want to have extremely high impact, move fast, and I think as you kind of gather people toward a very clear goal with data and outcome, you minimize the tinkering because they also need to do this thing and do this thing and hit this goal. So you're kind of forcing them to do just the right enough tinkering that gets them to their goal. I think as I work with AI, I build a lot of skills that are around how do I explain checksum, how do I message, how do I follow up with customers. I have a skill, for example, probably Joe, it's the first time you hear it. Sometimes they ask me to send emails and they send me a copy of the email. I have a skill that take an AE email and convert it to my voice because there's a few things they do that I'll never send. Probably I should just send them the skill and say, hey, here's my skill of how you write in Gal's voice. It basically says, I like to send my phone number to customers so they can always text me and it's very useful. I like to have a very friendly tone. So stuff that it's personal. It's not good or bad, it's just my personal thing. Can we send it? I have a skill of how we talk about checksum when I need to write marketing material, share it with the marketing team, maybe they can share their skills with me. So there is another level that I don't think we've fully cracked and we still need to figure it out.
I think that's the one thing that we're also getting very intentional about, not just at Checksum, but Superset and other companies in the Hive as well, is creating reusable skills. So to your earlier point about I may use Claude, you may use ChatGPT, we're trying to not enforce, but okay, softly enforce. Hey, let's just all use Claude, and so that we can have a shared set of skills that are all put up in a GitHub repository, depending on what function you. So if you're a go-to-market person, you have these skills of how to pitch and how do you handle objections and how to create content and all of that. All those are skills that are in GitHub. You can download them, install them in your Claude instance, local Claude instance, and now everybody's sharing the same thing. Same thing in MCP servers. Gal talked about how their engineering team has built tools so that you can connect MCP servers to Claude Code, and sales teams can go in and say, well, who's the customer who's doing X, Y, and Z, so they know who to reach out to for renewals and all of that. So the more you standardize, the easier it gets. I think everybody is still trying to figure out what it means to standardize. Skills have become a common way in which you achieve the standardization. So that's where we are, at least on our journey right now.
And I will add, there is a company to be built in, so you're kind of limited by the tools, because I set up something similar like OpenClaw. It's called Hermes on my Linux at home, and I use it, and it's super useful. It has access to my email, it has access to our HubSpot, it has access to our note recording, everything I need. That's when I say I built a skill, I built a skill there, so it's accessible over Slack and Telegram. I take the bus every morning. Sometimes I can leave a voicemail in the bus like, hey, I need to schedule a meeting with you back, and you check when my calendar is open and shoot him an email with like a few suggested options. So it's only 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, but it adds up and it didn't take me too much. I can't set it up for my team because it uses my own email. But if there's a solution that allows me to host a company-wide OpenClaw or whatever it is, but then allow each team member to connect it to their own email, that would be awesome. There isn't. Right now, I think there isn't. You either set it up for yourself and then I need to redo it 10 times, and you need some way to share the skills together, so you need to kind of build it yourself, or you're stuck on using like a typical ChatGPT, which I think is not as powerful. And
something called NemoClaw, right? NVIDIA has something called NemoClaw that claims to do this.
That's why I stopped myself and I didn't.
Yeah. Anyway,
maybe.
But it is a timely question. It's a very germane question given the state the state of tooling right now. Everybody is trying to figure this out as we speak. So. One more.
Thank you so much for the talk, and I got really inspired by like how you start a startup and then continuously make it grow. So I have a question about how do you find the target customers for a startup or like a pre-startup stage? For example, like for most of people, they have an idea for a product and they want to build it. They have people and they can actually make this specific plan and turn it into a PRD and actually build it and launch it. But like when it comes to actually write a landing page, it's just really hard to find that one sentence or one pitch to describe their product, because they're just not very familiar with the market, and we don't know whether people need this product or if this product is is lacking in this market. So in my opinion, there are two ways. For example, I can go to events like this to ask people if they need this and read their reactions and add them to the wait list after we launch. But the other way is that the other round, we launch it first and then see the customers and then learn from. Luckily, we have customers. We can learn from how they're using our product and so on. So what's your opinion about this?
I think it's a big challenge, and that's one of the learnings for us as at Superset is getting that initial messaging right. So we talked about something called, we talk about PMF, product market fit. We talk about MMF, message market fit. Right? So it's in the grand scheme of things, it's easier especially if you're an engineer and a techie, to bid. Hey, I'm going to build a product that solves this particular problem. How do you describe it? How do you tell the story? How do you create that narrative? That's a hard problem. And that's one of the things that, as part of our Signal program, we work with our co-founders on a lot, is say it in as clear terms as possible. help figure out who you're selling to, why do they care, what pain points does your product solve for them, and then narrate it in a narrative that is yay long, not 10, 20 pages long. That's part of what we're doing in terms of tooling now. With AI especially, you can do these kinds of things where you test out different messages, and that's one of the things that all of this tool that Gal and I were talking about that helps our co-founders do is create these types of experiments, starting with a product description. What is the ICP? Who are we targeting? What should we say to them? What signals do we look out for? How do we message it? All of these things are outputs of this tool that we've created.
Yeah, and then like test it out on the field. Like
Yes.
I said. So if you have a message, go on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever, and just start tweeting about the problem you're solving or LinkedIn. You'll get a few likes. Everyone who liked it should get a message. Hey, I saw you like my message about XYZ. I'm actually starting. Do you mind if we talk for 30 minutes about this? It seems like you. So, and then you just gather, like you gather the one person and the second person and the third person, and you go to an event. It's really small scale. Like that's the nice thing about one of the headaches we have right now at Checksum is everything we need to do is in a relatively large scale. Like how do you 3x your revenue, then 3x your revenue, then 3x your revenue. And that's I don't know if it's a harder problem, but it's a problem that is harder to just solve by sheer power of will. But I think early on, like you can probably solve all of your problems just by just doing the thing. Like how do you recruit early on? Just send 20 messages a day for good engineers. You get one person who wants to join. How do you find customers? Just send 20, 30 messages a day. You get one, you get two, you get three. And because it's a small number, you can just power through things, which is very, very nice, I think, because then you can solve it.
Brute force
Yeah, brute force, exactly.
works.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for the presentation. On the subject of message market fit, I had a question about differentiating your message. I think an experience probably all of us have shared if you go through SF and you see like a bunch of billboards that say agents that work for you, right? You're going to see a million of those that say kind of the same thing. If you're trying to build for agents nowadays, how do you avoid being like one of 100 that are saying the exact same thing and actually connect with your customers?
Well, you have to have a hook. It's hard to have a one-liner or a 5-word phrase that is truly differentiated, unless you've solved a problem that nobody's working on or nobody has solved, right? Which is highly, highly unlikely in today's day and age. So the differentiation that you're seeking actually comes after you've gotten the initial hook. So to God's point, in the early stages, by sheer force of will, you get 5 conversations going. And there, you have to have a differentiation narrative, which you can explain. It may not be explainable in 5 words, because it's somewhat nuanced, but once you get those initial 2-3 customers, you learn from that, your message will improve, and it's always, iteration is the name of the game. The message you come up with you have MMF or PMF, it's an in-the-moment thing. 6 months from now, that may not be as relevant as it was today. So you're constantly evolving. And then as you work with more and more customers, and this happened to us at Crux, actually, our previous startup, we struggled for the longest time to clearly articulate what was unique about what we did. And turned out that the unique thing was something that we took for granted. We thought it was so obvious that everybody was going to do it this way. It was not until a couple of customers told us, no, we cannot do this with your competitors. And here's why. That's when light bulbs went off and said, ooh. And then we got that 1 word or 2 words that became our our differentiator. It wasn't something that happened just organically. We had to work on it.
Thank you.
In the back again.
Hi. First of all, please excuse me because I'm a non-coder, so it sounds silly. But my question is, what is the biggest advantage Checksum has over any human tester? Like, because there's substantial investment if I buy the Checksum or I involve it in my process. So, what is the biggest advantage? And I also wanted to know about the disadvantage of Checksum.
So the advantage of Checksum against manual QA testers?
Yeah.
I think the problem today, and by the way, we're never of the philosophy of replacing people. I think we want to empower people, we want to accelerate them. In general, we want AI to be, do good. And so I think what we see with manual QA testers is they just, and also QA automation is the same problem. They can't keep up. Like when your engineering team is shipping 5-10x more features every day, then your manual QA testing constantly need to change, constantly need to adapt, and they constantly need tests. So teams need to make a decision. Are we shipping slower? So for manual QA to be able to under test and fully validate it, or are we shipping without testing? Same for QA automation. You can't write the number of tests you need. And so I think with Checksum is we just allow them to keep up. So typically, when there's only manual QA automation, it could be like the best way to come in. There's no QA automation, there's no preconceived notion. There are people who really know the product, who really care about quality, but they just need the 10x. They need the cloud code to their work. Like engineers are able to 10x because cloud code. They need the Checksum to 10x themselves so they can keep up. So it's actually a wonderful situation for us. As long as the manual QA person understands that they need to lean into AI and not, try to do the same thing they did, because they're going to do their day-to-day is going to be completely different after Checksum something. That's for sure.
And also, I come from a GXP industry, from life sciences. So whatever testing is done by Checksum, like, is it accepted as evidence? I'm talking like in terms of 21 CFR Part 11 for the computer system validation.
Yeah, so are you asking, is it accepted by the customer?
By the regulatory bodies, can we submit, and we cannot say like this has been tested by Checksum?
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
I think giving people, so it's very similar to AI coding. I just use that as an analogy. I think in the early days, you would ask Cloud Code to write this line of code, write that line of code. As you were more comfortable with using Cloud Code, and as AI became better, people would make bigger and bigger changes, to the point today that people develop full features with Cloud Code without even reading the code, right? Like the extreme people just not even reviewing the code, they just test the outcome and they ship. So I think it's the same idea of building trust. You need to design a product that allows people to micromanage the AI. I think even if the AI doesn't need to micromanage, you need to design a product that allows people to micromanage the AI so they can gain trust, and then allow them to take step by step to the place where they just let Checksum run the test. They don't even check whether the tests are correct because they trust it, but when a test fails, that's where they lean in and say, oh, the test failed, we have a bug.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. The best analogy I can give you right now is probably we're not at that stage right now where a regulatory body will accept results from Checksum as for life sciences. But one thing I'd say is just like what's happened already with SOC 2, right? There are companies now that automate the whole SOC 2 compliance process, right? And they do it with software and AI. We are going to get to a stage where all of the testing that is done in life sciences for drug development, etc., all of that will be powered by AI at some point in time. It's just a matter of time when the regulations evolve, when the software the AI and the software evolves enough for the regulators to accept that. Just like what's happened with regulations like SOC 2 on the compliance side. it's a good question.
Thank
And
you.
there may be a company there to be built, actually, also.
I just wanted to add to her first question. How do you quantify the results? Like, what metrics do you give your potential customers? Okay, this is why you need to use Checksum. Do you have some kind of a pitch like that?
It will,
Let me just repeat the question because
Oh, sorry.
we're recording. So the question was, what kind of metrics or what kind of evidence does Checksum provide to customers to prove that it's working, right? So
it was a process, and again, I'm describing it because I sense there's a lot of builders in the room, so we didn't know it from day one, but slowly but surely we listen to our customers. We build a Jira integration, for example, so now we can measure how many bugs Checksum missed, because every time we open a bug, Checksum missed. Every time we detect a bug, we open a Jira ticket, and our customers can classify it, our AI classifies it, and then our customer can acknowledge or not, whether it's a minor bug, critical bug, or a customer can say it's not a bug, it's a false positive. We measure for some companies how long does a PR sit in a PR state. Like, are we actually able to allow it to close PRs faster and merge it faster? So we do those small, and obviously how many code changes did we make, how many tests did we generate. That's easy because we assume every change that you make, it's equivalent to a person needing to make it, and then, you know, even if they use AI, they need to spend 5, 10, 20 minutes of their day, and there are customers where we make hundreds of those changes every day. So we save them easily 5-6 hours per team a day just by, you know, being always on, and then you count the bugs that we catch and tests that we generated. So piece by piece, we kind of add those integrations to add the measurements. Usually when a big client comes, they force you to measure those things, and then you're like, great, now I can actually use it for the smaller customers who just trust you, but it's a nice addition.
two more, one all the way in the back and then one.
Yeah, and I think that's the last one.
Probably, yeah. Last two questions and then I think we'll call it.
This question again, bugging me. It's more on how you architect your testing solution. Are you kind of outsourcing the actual intelligence of, you know, understanding your customer's code to the frontier one, or I reckon what you're doing is maybe developing like a system from slowly understanding, like, you know, customer code and then generating the test analysis, right? Yeah. So my question is, when you have a working solution, are you hoping that the newer models will be more intelligent to do the job, or it's working now to, you know, to understanding my customer's code? Let's lock it down, for instance. Yeah. Because I know I come from programming for machines, like chip testing machines, and companies like Intel, they can design one machine that works, and actually the next 5 years they copy exact the code, no changes. Yeah. So from your point of view, when you are, you know, developing your test solution for the customer's codes, how much of the IT, for instance, is actually your intelligence to the model to do the job, or your, because it could be one day where I know Claude, for instance, they use Claude to create a lot of code. I'm sure they're also using Claude to debug their codes. So a great thing to do that one day that, you know, you can that maybe Opus 5.5 can actually go into the code base and develop me a testing solution. Yeah.
It's a great question. So let me break it down into two. The first one, whether AI will be good enough to never have bugs. And I think we see the exact opposite correlation. The smarter AI and the better AI is, there are actually more bugs, because people use it to do more ambitious stuff, and I think it will always be the case. So if Opus 5.5 is as good as a senior architect with 20 years of experience, I think it's actually going to create more bugs, because people are going to build full, very complex enterprise-level systems just with cloud code, and then you're just going to have one person who needs to review the code, one human, and they're not going to have the capacity, so they're going to ship it to these. So you're actually going to create more bugs, not less. And that's our bet, and that's the correlation we see up until now. And the problem just becomes worse as models become better, which is a good thing, because we're pushing the envelope. And in terms of whether people can do it with Cloud Code, I think, look, the power of checksum doesn't come from just verifying syntax. Just verifying syntax, I agree with you. If Cloud Code did A minus B instead of A plus B, probably this will be solved. The power of checksum is connecting the things that make enterprise software complex, the same as I started with Airbnb. Why is Airbnb deployment so complex if you can vibe code something that works on your local machine in a weekend? Because Airbnb deployment is millions of services or thousands of services all working together with thousands of third-party services all working together with real humans that use your product in different places on different machines on different computers, deployed over probably millions of machines across the world, so you can get a response in 10 milliseconds and not 200 milliseconds, with terabytes of data in your database. That's what makes Airbnb so complex and why they probably need, I don't know, hundreds of engineers. But in theory, it's just where you have a database list of hotels, where you get the list of hotels, here's a credit card. It's very simple in essence. And all of this complexity, I think, only going to increase as LLMs become better because people will be more ambitious. And as this complexity increases, I think having a software that actually understands your customers and understands your deployment and simulates data and connects it to production and works 24/7 is going to be even more valuable. So the value of checksum is not the models, maybe another way to phrase it, is the harness and the systems and the connectors and the code we wrote, the business code we wrote. I know it's crazy, like people today don't try to write business code, it's all agent and tools. No, we have to write business code and logic and put the thoughts and how to best to solve this problem. All of this is our IP, not the model. And I think we need to keep developing it. As models become better, we need to keep making sure our IP leaps ahead of what the models can do without it.
All right, I think we'll call it that there. Gal, thank you so much. Thank you all for coming and engaging questions. We're going to hang around for a little bit. So please, there's still plenty of food there, and I can't see it all. I'm assuming there's plenty of food there. And I know there's plenty of drinks. I can assure you about that. So thank you all for coming. Thanks.
Shot from WTI. I wasn't there.
Yeah, they've messaged me that you're going to be here.
Yeah, well, one of you guys did amazing.